Welcome back everybody, it's Carol here at Aakash Journals, and this is the next little wreath that I'm going to be embroidering in the mini series that I'm doing. It's a fabric journal made up of wreath embroideries. These little wreaths are only tiny. This one is about 4 inches in diameter. So this is the one I'm going to embroider, pretty similar in a way to the previous one. If you haven't seen any of these previous wreaths that I've embroidered, please check out my playlist because there are a few videos there showing the first few wreaths that I've embroidered and also the cover that I've also embroidered. I say this one is pretty similar to the previous one because there's oak leaves in it, and I did that one with thread painting, so I'm going to have another go at that whilst it's still fresh in my head. And as you can see, there's 4 leaves, so there's 1, 2, 3 and 4, and I'm going to try and do some thread painting with these 3 colours, all stranded cottons. These 2 are DMCs. This one, not too sure where I got this one from, but as you can see, this is a variegated one. So I'm going to attempt thread painting with these colours for those leaves. As you can see, there are little sprigs of what I think are fir branches just dotted around, and I'm going to go for this DMC 936, which is a fairly deep green. We've got some tiny little red berries, so I'm going to go for DMC 368 for those, and again I'm going to go in with Colonial Knots. As you can see, there are some big sprigs of foliage. There's one there, another one here, and another one here, and I'm going to use this Steph Francis number 16. Again, as you can see, it's a variegated one, so I think that will add a touch of interest to those large sprigs. And then I've got DMC 580, and there are odd single leaves, so there's 2 there, 2 there, 2 there and 2 there, and I'm going to use this DMC 580 for those. Let me get this hooped up, and I'm going to go straight in with the oak leaves, doing the long and short stitch. So I'll be back when I've got a couple of those done so that you can see what they look like. So I'm back again with another quick update. As you can see, I've done all my oak leaves. It didn't work as well as I thought it would. Like that one probably the best out of all the leaves, and sorry, I've got thread across here. Perhaps that one. I find if I just go over the threads with my thumbnail as well, it helps soften them in and bed them down. I'm going to put some veins on my leaf up the centre in a darker thread, probably in that one if it's dark enough. If not, I'll go in with one slightly darker. But I've used 3 colours here on these leaves, so that for the outer edge here, then this one going inside a little bit, and then a small portion in the centre with this variegated one. And even though it was only a very, very small portion in the centre, it actually does stand out quite a bit. As you can see, I've gone in and started doing my sprigs here, and for that I use my Steph Francis number 16 thread for that. Really fine, and the stitch that I used for doing these was a closed fly stitch. I'm going to try and do a little bit on camera for you now, although it's not very easy at all with this thread. It's a little bit thicker than a single strand of DMC thread, but it is a little bit awkward to try and stitch with. But I'll drop the camera down and hopefully you should be able to see me at least do 1 leaf, and then I'll go off and finish off the sprig. So there's my first stitch going into place there, and as I say, I'll drop the camera down for you. So let's do that. So I'm hoping that's going to be enough for you and for me to be able to see what I'm doing. So just coming up just slightly to the left of my last stitch, and then going over to the other side, doing the same, holding my thread with my thumb, coming up in the middle and just gently pulling it together. And then what I try and do is go down the same hole that I just came up, just to hold it in place. So that's all I'm doing for these little stitches. So there's one, and on the other side, coming up in the middle. And again, I'm just coming up just below the last stitch that I did, closing it up, and trying to go down the same hole. So I'm not doing that particularly well because I'm on camera, which is sod's law, but I'll carry on doing it anyway. So off to one side. And the nice thing about using this Steph Francis number 16, it's a variegated thread, so you don't have to worry about changing your threads. It's all, or the colour of your threads, it's all done for you. So I've got a thread there that's not lying quite straight. Not too bothered about that though, really. I'm just doing these little embroideries for myself and my own little wreath journal. And obviously the green's coming into play now. For the stems of these little sprigs, I was just doing a stem stitch rather than split back stitch. I like doing these closed fly stitches for leaves, because you can, depending on where you put this little central stitch that I'm about to do in 1 second, you can actually make your leaf lean in one direction or another, just depending on how you stitch them really, which is quite nice. Whoops, I've got a little knot in my thread there, or a little tangle. There we go, just going to undo that. There we go. And I'm just coming down to the final few stitches. So I'm just going to go up to this leaf now, and because nobody's ever going to see the back of these embroideries, or this little embroidery, I'm not too bothered about doing a big long stitch like that underneath. Let's see if I can get another one of these done on camera for you. So I start off with a single straight stitch in the middle, and I'm just staggering these two parts of the fly stitch on this particular one, just to add a little bit more interest. I'm coming down there. Try not to pull my stitches too tight, but just tight enough so they sit nicely next door to each other. So that's my leaf done, and I'm just going to do a final little straight stitch just up to the base of that leaf, so that it's connected to the stem when I eventually get round to doing the stem. So there we go, I hope you can see that. And there we go, that's my stem stitch for that sprig. So I'm going to go in next with this colour, which is the DMC 936, and I'm going to do these little fir sprigs just dotted all over. So I've just got a single strand of that DMC thread, and as I mentioned, I'm just going to do just little straight stitches. So time has marched on a little bit with this one, and I'm almost finished. As you can see, I finished the little fir sprigs, and I've started putting in my little stitches for these berry sprigs, and for that I've used this DMC 580 and done either stem stitch and or little straight stitches, so nothing complicated about that. I still need to put in my veining on my oak leaves, but what I wanted to show you particularly were these leaves here. And again, I've used the 580 for that, and I used padded or raised fishbone stitch, so I thought I'd just do some stitching just to show you how I've done those. So what I've got here is my little practice hoop. This is about 3 inches across. It's not even a bound hoop, and I just use it generally with a scrap of fabric in, just to remind myself how to do a particular stitch if I haven't done it for a long time, or if there's a new stitch, to learn how to use it. And I just keep it in a little pouch off to one side. So I've put a scrap of fabric in here, and as you can see, I've just drawn a very, very basic leaf shape using my Friction marker pen, and I've threaded up a needle with a couple of strands of this 580 DMC thread, and I've got a quilter's knot in the back. I'm just going to tighten up that tension a little bit more on this hoop. There we go. So all you need to do for this is to come up at the tip of your leaf, come down about halfway down the center of your leaf. So I'm going to come down to about there. And you want to imagine a line straight across from the bottom. So again, you're almost cutting your leaf in half, but this time horizontally. So I'm going to come up about here, and I'm going to go up to this top point up here, and as close to the top as I can get it, but on the right hand side of that central stitch. Now I'm going to come out on the other side of that central stitch, so about there, and I'm going to come down to, again on the opposite side, that point there. So I've made a little teepee with that central stitch. So now I'm going to come out just below this diagonal stitch here on the left hand side, so slightly below. There we go. And I'm going to go back up to this top point here on the right hand side of this central stitch, but just immediately below that diagonal line. So up there like that. Now, as I say, I've got a couple of strands of DMC thread in here, and I like to just make sure that they lie nice and flat together. I'm not going to bother too much about this because it's just a practice piece. So coming out again from the underside to the top side, I'm just going to come out just at the top here, but below that line there. So let's come up there, or below that stitch there. And you want to keep your stitches nice and close together. And basically that is all you do. Now I'm going to go down on my design line, but just below where that other stitch ended. So something like that. There we go. Didn't quite have that stitch, that first stitch on the design line, but it's very forgiving. So now again across to the other side, below the stitches on the left hand side on the design line, and up to the top next door to the same stitches, and again on the design line. So I'm just trying to see where to go, and you just carry on doing that all the way down your leaf. And I really love doing this stitch. It gives a lovely effect down the center of your leaf. So you don't have to do any veining on it because the design creates the central vein of your leaf, and it gives you a lovely padded effect. It's also quite an interesting stitch to stitch this one because you start encountering your previous stitches as you come down, and you start thinking, well, where am I going to fit my next stitch in? Is that going to work? But it always does, always works out. Just have to have a little bit of faith in the process with this particular stitch. So I'm just smoothing down my threads a little. I'm going to come up there. So I'm just going to carry on working this stitch all the way down. And I'm just going to speed up the camera a little bit for you so that it's not like watching paint dry as I work my way down. So you can see here on the right hand side, I am almost up to this line of stitches here. So nothing to worry about. You just carry on working over the top of those stitches, and that's what gives you your raised or your padded fishbone stitch. You can work into the holes that you created for those stitches, or you can create new holes. It won't matter. Just trying to line up those stitches again, or those threads again. So just line them up as best you can. Obviously the more time you take doing this, the better finish you get, but you can see the little detail you get coming down the center. So just carry on working your stitches all the way down your leaf design. And just keep going until you get right down to the bottom. And when you think you can't get any more threads in, you can probably just get the odd one or two in just to round out the bottom. So I'm right down at the central point at the bottom of my leaf, and I'm just going to tuck in another one here on the right hand side. And I'm not going to go out to my design line, I'm just going to tuck it in underneath, and that should just round that bottom bit off a little bit better. And same on the other side. And I'm just going to tuck it in just under there, and it just rounds it off a little bit, as you can see. And because I haven't actually straightened my stitches very well as I've gone, you can just smooth them out a little bit with your needle, and you can also get a much better rounded off bottom to your leaf if you need to. And this is what it looks like on the back. As you can see, it gives a nice clean finish on the back, and a good one if you wanted to start off with a waist knot rather than a quilter's knot like I have there, and then you would have a really clean finish to the back of your stitch. So there we go. So that's that. So that is exactly the same stitch that I used for these little ones. All I'm going to do now is go in with my veining on my oak leaves, and for that I'm going to use stem stitch, I think, in a slightly darker thread that I've used for this shading that's gone on there. And then I'll give this an iron to get rid of the fricks and marker pens, and come back and show you the finished piece. So this is the finished wreath now that the embroidery is all done. As you can see, I've done the veining on the leaf, and that I did with a single strand of DMC thread. I did find that it wasn't standing out enough, so I went over it a second time. And yeah, I'm pretty pleased with this little one. So I will take it away now, trim the edges, give it a good press with my iron. I always press my embroideries on a towel with an ironing cloth over the top. The ironing cloth will either be damp or I use the steam setting on my iron, and this hoop mark just comes out a treat, not a problem at all. I'll put some close-up photos at the end for you to have a look at, and we've still got a few more of these wreath designs to go, so I hope you join me for the next in this little mini series to see which one I'm embroidering and how I get on. Until then, take care everybody. Bye bye now.